Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mate roast Bill Kristol, and they do in a glorious fashion for this lame ad I'm about to show you. So they seeing the support sort of fade with the GOP, and Bill Kristol puts out this ad, or Bill Kristol and his people put out this ad about trying to push. This is an ad about war, advocating for war support. So this is not even advocating for red or blue or voting or anything like that. This is advocating for GOP to support the Ukraine war. And then we'll go into the analysis by Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mate. But here is the ad. It's 30 seconds long.
When America arms Ukraine, we get a lot for a little. Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine, and with it, they've destroyed 50% of Putin's army. We've done all this by sending weapons from storage, not our troops. The more Ukraine weakens Russia, the more it also weakens Russia's closest ally, China. America needs to stand strong against our enemies. That's why Republicans in Congress must continue to support Ukraine.
GOP
when America arms Ukraine, we get a lot for a little. Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine, and with it, they've destroyed 50% of Putin's army. We've done all this by sending weapons from storage, not our troops. The more Ukraine weakens Russia, the more it also weakens Russia's closest ally, China. America needs to stand strong against our enemies. That's why Republicans in Congress must continue to support Ukraine.
Republicans for Ukraine, GOP for Ukraine.com. Paid for by Defending Democracy Together. You love those names that these lobbyists, these scumbag super PAC people give to fool the average American. But let's zoom out of this video and let's see what he posted as a caption. It says, this ad will air on Sunday's show tomorrow in DC. And now let's look and see what Aaron Mate and Glenn Greenwald says. We're going to start with Glenn Greenwald. And let's look at his analysis, or at least his tweet on the matter. And it says here, Bill Kristol, arguably the neocon who has lied most pathologically and compulsively over the last 3 decades, and who has the greatest amount of innocent blood on his hands, is now producing propaganda for Biden's war, a war policy that only U.S. liberals overwhelmingly support. Spot on by Glenn Greenwald, and it's an actual thread, unless he continues, and Glenn goes on to say, Bill Kristol, on his own current partisan identification and which party he sees as the best instrument to advance his neocon worldview. This is an excerpt. He's pulling out a receipt here. And it says, when asked where he was politically, Bill Kristol told TNR, I'm pretty comfortable with the current Democratic Party. We are okay with Biden. We think, in fact, one thing we could do is strengthen the moderate Democratic Party. Just shameful. So this guy, Bill Kristol, understand he's not a Democrat. He's not a progressive. He doesn't want any of the things that all of you want. He's saying, I'm with the Democrats. But Marianne Williamson doesn't want to admit that Democratic Party are now the war party. She doesn't want to admit like the Democrats are worse, and they are. Now let's go to Aaron Mate's critique. And it says, Bill Kristol makes an ad urging GOP to keep funding the Ukraine proxy war. The pitch, when we weaken Russia, we weaken China. How lucky for Bill that he doesn't have to make an ad targeting Democrats on Ukraine. They're 100% on board with Bill and fellow pro-war neocons. And I did want to zoom in on this point here when we get back to the video, and that is weaken China. So in order to get GOP on board, you have to say this is going to weaken the other people you want to go to war with.
Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine.
So they're trying to say this is not even a lot of money. It's just $100 billion. But if we turn around and say we need $100 billion to go to average working day people, then we go, who's going to pay for it? I'm going to rewind it to play it from the beginning.
America arms Ukraine, we get a lot for a little. Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5.
Again, understand the $115 billion. They're saying that's a little. They're saying that's a little.
% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine, and with it, they've destroyed 50% of Putin's army. We've done.
That's just made up. 50% of his army is
all this by sending weapons from storage, not our troops.
Sending weapons from storage and promising tanks. Did we forget about the tanks that's not even made yet, that they're making the ship later? So that's another lie.
The more Ukraine weakens Russia, the more it also weakens Russia's.
That's how they're selling it to another neocon. You're a neocon, but just a different way. You're a neocon against China. I'm a neocon against Russia. So listen, be a little neoconish against Russia. It helps you in your neoconish against China. That's the selling point.
Closest ally, China. America needs to stand strong against our enemies. That's why Republicans in Congress must continue to support Ukraine.
Just absurd that they have to make an ad. They should be making an ad. This should be targeting AOC and the squad and people on the left is who should be targeted about these ads if they were standing up in the way that they should. But shout out to Aaron Matei. I say Mate, but he says, I always hear him say Matei, and Glenn Greenwald for both of their brief but precise critiques of Bill Kristol. So